Every movie tells a story. Every story tells a tale. Come with us as the people behind the Cinemadness podcast talk candidly about the stories that connect them to their favorite movies. This is Real Stories from the Aisles.
Welcome, one and all, to Cinemadness, the podcast, personal audio. So, in 1992, there was a particular film that came out that was very personal to me, and I'm going to get into that in a second. But the film itself was called Scent of a Woman. And I know what you're saying, Roman. It's personal to you. Have you ever helped a blind man who was on a suicide pact? No, I haven't. Okay, well, have you ever been a blind man with a suicide pact? No, I haven't. Have you ever been basically berated by your said blind brother who basically brings you down a notch at Thanksgiving dinner? Well, no, I haven't. So why is this movie in 1992 so personal? Let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit more. So, Scent of a Woman, of course, originally came out in 1992, and it stars Al Pacino and this little guy named Chris O'Donnell. A couple interesting things about this film is it was actually originally over 3 hours long, but it was edited to a very tidy 2 hours and 37 minutes. And that was still on the behest of the studios who produced the film, which makes it a very long but very insightful film. It's a character study. The story is that of Lieutenant Colonel Slade, who is basically on house arrest, for want of a better term, by his family. His family is leaving. His sister, is leaving for Thanksgiving to her in-laws, and is taking the family and leaving her brother, Colonel Slade, alone by himself. So she hires this guy, played by Chris O'Donnell, who's just a kid in a private school who's trying to earn some extra money so he can go home for the holidays. Well, Chris O'Donnell plays a very nervous and meek character known as Charlie. And what then pursues in this film is a bonding relationship between Charlie and Colonel Slade. Or as he says, "Call me Frank." So as the film continues, it's a variation of buddy comedy meets chicken soup of the soul, if you will, for the soul, if you will, which is very intriguing and very captivating. There are some amazing monologues that some I can't repeat because I just won't do justice that Al Pacino gives, and it's very thought-provoking and is very honest in many ways. The film continues on, and eventually Charlie is helped out by Frank, Lieutenant Colonel Slade, and essentially gives Lieutenant Colonel Slade another reason to live. This film itself was kind of panned, lukewarm reviews by some critics who said the film was too long, that the film itself was a bit of a fluff ending, if you will. I could see perspectives on that, but at the end of the day, I see a fantastic film that is very tender in many ways, that has an honest way to show a blind man who is trying to find direction in his life, and whether or not he likes to admit it or not. And a blind man who's very strong, who has to admit his shortcomings in some ways, that not everything is coming to you the way that you want it. And the film goes further in depth into his character and that character of Lieutenant Colonel Slade, and it really does use the vehicle of Chris O'Donnell's character Charlie very well to really bring out a lot of those flaws and a lot of those insecurities and a lot of those kind moments that a lot of other characters would just get a brash or a canned, gruff answer. Why is this film important, and how did it come into the Roman Forum, if you will, or the Roman Volt. Well, let's go ahead and talk about that. So I originally saw this film in around 1993. I believe it was on HBO, and I put it on because my family's thought it was funny. The reason why they thought it funny was not because it was a dig on the blind or anything to that accordance, but they thought it was funny because Al Pacino continues to say the phrase "hooah." Well, hooah, for those of you who are listening who are military inclined, have a military background, you may know that hooah is a phrase that is used for every situation except for the word no. So, you want to go ahead and take that dune? Hooah. Do you want more ammo? Hooah. Would you like to go ahead and see that new Al Pacino film? Hooah. For example, of course. So my father was just really, really excited that someone was popularizing the phrase hooah because he said it his whole life. Because my father, as some of you may not know and maybe not know until this point, was in the military my whole life. And so when my father saw the film, he was really excited by it. And I, of course, wanted a reason to converse with my pop. So I sat with an 11-year-old brain and watched this film and couldn't understand nor comprehend. So years later, I am alone by myself, like most kids do. They move out of the house. So my first place, I didn't have any cable. All I had was an internet connection and the occasional run to Walmart to the $5 bin. Well, I ended up picking Son of a Woman. And one of the reasons being is it's a way to see my dad in some degree. Now, it's very interesting when you see Son of a Woman because the character of Frank Slade won Al Pacino an Academy Award. Now, Al Pacino, I believe, was up for an Academy Award at least 8 times total in his career, and he did not win it. Not for Godfather, not for any of the other films that he's famous for, Serpico. He was actually up for an Academy Award for Dick Tracy, believe it or not, which when researching that, I had a chuckle. And this year when he won in 1992, he was also up for the award for Best Supporting Actor in Glenn Ross. So it's just a testament to how awesome of an actor he is, but in some ways how underrated he is because of the fact that he's only won one Academy Award. The film itself also has an amazing job by Chris O'Donnell, who comes across very meek but very caring. Also, a very young Philip Seymour Hoffman is in it, and that was actually his big break, if you will. Interesting story. Philip Seymour Hoffman, during this time period, was working at a deli, and he actually auditioned for this role in Son of a Woman 5 times. Let that sink in for a second. Other actors that tried out for Chris O'Donnell's character of Charlie were people that you may have heard of: Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, and strangely enough, and interesting enough, Chris Rock. Chris Rock, in 2014, for a magazine interview, he confessed that he auditioned for the role of Charlie, and he thought it would have been fascinating to have to use his terms, black kid, as Charlie, as opposed to who they eventually picked. I think that would be very interesting. I would have liked to have seen Chris Rock act off of Al Pacino. I think that would have been a very interesting dynamic, but you eventually got roles like this, where you have a mixed race older person with a younger person. Funny Forrester sticks out in my mind. In also, you have more recently the film with Kevin Hart and the gentleman from Breaking Bad, and that name of the film eludes me at this point, but kind of the same thought behind it. Someone with a disability is befriended by a black person, and then the story takes off from there. So I can see Chris Rock's perspective, but I have to politely disagree. At least with this one, I think it was very good how they had it elevate with Chris O'Donnell. So all in all, this film really still strikes me, and it's something that I enjoy. It's something that's very intimate in many ways, and it's a very awesome art piece because of the monologues and the way that the character evolves, where you see a very rugged, standoffish character in Colonel Frank Slade, and he eventually lightens up and he sees an opportunity to help Charlie with his dilemma in his school. If you haven't seen it, I'd strongly recommend that you go check it out. If you are looking for some particular reason to check it out, again, as I must reiterate, just check out Al Pacino in this. The way he portrays a blind person is phenomenal. He really took a lot of heart and tenderness into his portrayal of the blind. He actually he immersed himself in the school of the blind, which name eludes me at this point, so please forgive me. And he really did find little idiosyncrasies like how to pour liquor when you're blind, how to light a cigar when you're blind, how to hold a cane properly, how to shake hands. All these little nuances he really picked up from working with the blind themselves and really being a great advocate, I feel, for the blind. And so I strongly encourage you to check it out if you haven't done so already. If not, stop by my house. We can pop it on, hang out, have a couple of John Daniels. That's right, it's John Daniels, because when you've known him as long as I've known him, you're on an inside joke basis, to paraphrase the line from the film. It is a long film, but it goes by quick because of how interested I am in the character. But then again, it could be for nostalgia reasons as well. So I would love to hear what you guys think. And please feel free to follow me at Rome de Rod on Twitter. And that concludes this edition. So be sure to check us out on Cinemadness Podcast and listen to the other installments from my fantastic friends here at Cinemadness Podcast. Thank you very much, guys.